Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Atheneaum Spotlight with Guy McLain and Mark Auerbach. I'm Mark Auerbach, so you must be Guy McLain.
That must be the case, yes.
Yeah, that must be the case. And you're watching us on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 or Southwick Community Programming Channel 15, or listening to us on 89.5 FM WSKB. So, Guy McLain, we haven't seen each other in a bit. What's going on at the Atheneaum?
Well, we're really excited. We've got a great fall schedule in mind. We've got a lot of activities, art exhibits are going on, and we have the trip to the Boston Symphony on October 28th. We're really excited about that. That's going to be a fun trip. And so we're really looking forward to that. So we've got a lot of great activities going on.
So let's talk about that, because you've got a deadline coming up that people need to, if they want to go with you to the symphony, they need to order their tickets pretty quickly. But you guys launched a cultural travel program this summer with a Tanglewood trip.
Yes, and it was very successful. We had a great time. Everybody on the trip really enjoyed it. It was a great concert. It was a beautiful day at Tanglewood. We had a great time, and it made us feel like this is something that people want in the community. Everyone on the trip said, "I hope you do trips like this in the future." I love these kinds of trips, and so that's exactly what we have in mind. We're doing the Boston Symphony this fall. We're planning another trip in the spring. We're looking at different possibilities, different venues. So we're gonna look at a lot of different options. Concerts. We might also have some trips to museums. So we're looking at different choices, because clearly people in the Westfield community want to take part in these kinds of programs. And it's a great chance for people to meet other people who have similar interests. So I think it's a great program for us.
So this particular trip to Boston is on a Friday afternoon for a matinee, and you get your round-trip bus from the Atheneaum.
Right. See, that's the thing about it is it's all inclusive. All you have to do is show up the Atheneaum. We're gonna meet at 10 o'clock in the morning. Drive. We have a nice bus. We're gonna drive to Boston. You don't have to worry about driving yourself on the Mass Pike. You don't have to worry about parking in Boston. That's all taken care of. We have a lunch planned at a nice little restaurant just about a block away from Symphony Hall. Then we'll go over for an afternoon concert. And the reason we chose the afternoon concert is that allows us to get everyone back to Westfield by about 6:30 or 7 in the evening. So it's not a super long day for people, which is really nice.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, you may think, oh, gee, I can go up and see the Boston Symphony at Tanglewood, but to see them, Symphony Hall in Boston is a beautiful building.
Yes. I love Symphony Hall. The acoustics are great there, and Tanglewood's a great experience. And we're planning on doing a Tanglewood trip next summer. But yes, Boston Symphony, it has to be experienced in Symphony Hall for nothing less than just the acoustics. The acoustics are so good there, and it's really an experience to do that. So I think people who love the Boston Symphony, they want to go to Tanglewood, but they also want to go to Symphony Hall as well.
So you got that going, which is really great. And the Laura Radwell, who was on the show not too long ago,
Yes.
has this exhibit that's currently at the Atheneaum.
Yes.
And you refurbished another exhibit which just had its opening.
Yes.
So you're a busy guy.
Yes. We're really doing it all. Art exhibits, concert programs. We've got a whole slate of activities, and I think this is what the Atheneaum should be doing. We should be having a lot of cultural activities. We're really kind of the cultural center for Westfield, and so and the building supports this. We've got the Lang Auditorium, which is great for small chamber music concerts and things like that. We've got the Rand Art Gallery, which is a wonderful space. Artists love it. Every artist I've brought to the space to look at it for a potential exhibit, they walk in there and they go, "Oh yes, this is a great space to exhibit their work." And right now, Laura Radwell is our exhibit. It's a beautiful exhibit. Everyone should come see it. very colorful, very dynamic. And then in November, we're going to have an exhibit of the art of Frank Cressati. Frank grew up in Westfield, so he really knows Westfield. In fact, he talked when I've talked to him in the past, he's talked about as a kid coming into the Westfield Atheneaum many years ago, and he's been a teacher, an art teacher in Western Mass for many years. So I think that's going to be a good show as well. So we've got great exhibits this fall, and we're looking for some good shows next year as well. So,
and one thing we should tell the public is they're free.
Right.
Which is a unique thing. A lot of times to go into a gallery, you have to pay.
Yes.
Or to go to one of the concerts that you produce. Well, the concerts you charge for, but all of this activity at the Atheneum is free. So who picks up the tab for all of this?
Well, we reach out to a variety of sources. There are certain granting agencies that we sometimes tap. Mass Humanities has funded certain projects for us. We also rely sometimes on businesses. Businesses sometimes sponsor exhibits. For instance, the art exhibits that we're doing this year are sponsored by Westfield Bank. The very generous donation. They are collaborating with us on putting these art exhibits together, and we're very appreciative of that. It's been very helpful to have their support putting these exhibits together. And also sometimes we rely on individuals to come forward. Sometimes individuals give us grants or donations, or they set up certain funds to support certain programs. So we bring in a lot of, we look at all kinds of different sources for funds, because these programs are expensive. There's no two ways about it.
So let me ask you a question here. I mean, we've been doing Atheneum Spotlight for over a year. We've never really talked about the funding sources for the Atheneum. But if somebody wanted to make a donation,
Yes.
they can.
They
and
sure
it's a
can.
tax-deductible contribution if you're an individual or a business
Right.
That want to sponsor. So if they want to do that, they reach out to you, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. They can give me a call, or if they want to make just a small donation, it's very simple. Individuals can go onto our website, westath.org, and there's a little button right there on the web page that says donate. You just click on that button, and you can just put the information in, follow the prompts, and you can make your donation to the Atheneum. With businesses, I like to talk to the businesses, because I think we not only can they support us, we can support them. I see our working with businesses as a collaboration. And many of the businesses come forward because they want to, they're looking to sponsor certain activities that make sense connected to their business, and I think that's a great arrangement, like the Westfield Bank arrangement with the art gallery. They were very excited about the possibility of supporting art and artists in Western Mass, and that's why they're working together with us. So it's really a collaboration in that case.
Yeah, and November is generally considered to be Philanthropy Month, and they have National Philanthropy Day. And I have to say, as a small business owner, when I partner with a nonprofit on some level, whether I sponsor an event or just make a contribution, it's part of if we don't have the nonprofits in our community, if we don't have the Westfield Atheneum providing all these services, which are primarily free to the public, then we lose a certain level of quality of life here. So if you
Yes.
think that an organization like the Atheneum or any of the services that it provides are important, and remember, it's a library too, so you're getting your books and videos and other things there, support it. It's
Yes.
that simple. And to some degree, it's tax deductible to the extent provided by law, but it's a way of you participating in maintaining the services that the Atheneum provides, not only for today, but for tomorrow.
Right, and also too, many people. One thing I have to remind many people is many people think that we're a city department, and so it's why should I support a city department? My tax dollars are going for that, but that's not the case. The Westfield Atheneum is a private nonprofit. We work together. We provide a service to the city of Westfield. We provide public library services, but we're an independent organization, and so we really rely on donations from the community and support from granting agencies to keep us going. And I think I think what you just got through saying is very important. We are an organization that provides a real service to the community every single day. People can walk in 6 days a week around the year, no matter what time of year it is, and acquire all kinds of services. Many people, I think, have this idea that libraries are only a place to go get a book. But of course, that's not the case at all. We provide all kinds of support. We provide technical support for people who have trouble doing certain things on the internet or having difficulty doing a resume, things like that. We provide those kinds of services. And also our children's department is very active with literacy skills and things like this. I just read recently that more than half of our 15-year-old students' readings level is below proficiency in our school systems today. And one of the things that we do, and many other public libraries also provide this service, is we provide assistance to parents who maybe has a child who maybe is having trouble developing reading skills. So we provide things like that are very, very important. We do that on a regular basis. Our children's librarians are experts on how to go about helping children develop literacy skills. That's a very important part of our activities.
And the other thing I was going to say, and I've learned this, although I don't live in Westfield, but I have a home office, and I work from home. I'm one of those remote workers. And every once in a while, you need to change a scene. And what I do is I pack up my laptop, and I go to my local library and set up. But they have Wi-Fi. And if I'm researching something, sometimes you don't want to go to Wikipedia, but sometimes you really want to find it in a book.
Yes.
And stuff like that. And so having a library around can be a really great thing when you're working on a project or a paper.
Right.
And things that you don't think about, or help with resumes or tax forms and all these other things.
Social Security, you're filling out Social Security forms, things like that. Yeah, I think it's a very good point about we have people come in and use the library for a quiet study space quite a bit. And also, too, people coming in for research purposes. A lot of people think that everything's available on Google these days, but that's not the case. And many times the depth of what you can get through just a Google search is not as complete as what you get at the library. There's a saying that's kind of that I've heard said more than once is if you need an answer to a question, you can get 100,000 answers from Google. You can get the best and the correct and the best answer from a librarian.
That is indeed true. We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters. We'll be back with more Atheneum Spotlight with Guy McLain. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. I'm Mark Auerbach. You are either watching us on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, Southwick Community Programming Channel 15, or listening to us on 89.5 FM WSKB. We'll be right back.
Underwriting for Community Radio on WSKB is brought to you in part by Rockies. Over 30 convenient locations throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Florida. One of the nation's largest ACE dealers. Expertise and great product selection in paint, hardware, lawn and garden. That's Rockies. Rock solid service since 1926. On the web at rockies.com. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio 89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Atheneaum Spotlight. I'm Mark Auer, back here with Guy McLain. So, Guy, you're talking about all these things that are going on at the Atheneaum, but that still leaves you, if you're working 12-hour days, that still leaves you a few minutes here and there to go do other things. So what are some of the fun things that you've done in the last week or so?
Well, I've been so busy with the projects. I haven't really had much time to do much of anything. I usually go home about 8 o'clock in the evening and collapse, in front of the television set or something, and then, that's the end of my day. But I hope later this fall to get into New York to see the premiere of a brand new opera by the composer Kevin Putz, who's doing the opera is called The Hours, and it's based on the Michael Cunningham Pulitzer Prize winning novel.
And the movie with that Nicole Kidman.
Yes. A great movie, a great book. I loved the book. I read it many years ago. I think Michael Cunningham wrote the book in the late 90s, and it was a great success at the
Well,
time.
in the cast for that opera, it's Renee Fleming.
Yes.
And Kelly O'Hara from Broadway.
Yes.
And I can't remember who the third. Joyce Donato.
Joyce Donato. That's right. That's it.
With
Yes.
that's stellar casting.
And Renee Fleming, she hasn't been doing much lately, so it's a chance to see Renee Fleming in a new role.
Well, she's not doing a lot of opera. She was up here this summer. She was at the Mahawi in Great Barrington doing a recital.
It seems like she's switching gears now and doing more recitals, fewer operas. But I think this was a project that she really embraced. She was very interested in, and that's why I think she signed up to do it. And boy, I'm excited because it may be one of the last few operas that she's involved in. Opera voices don't last forever, and she's getting to the point where she's having to do less.
Yeah, I'm heading to New York in November to see the new Broadway musical Some Like It Hot, based on the movie with Marilyn Monroe and Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon that came out in the late 50s.
Late 50s.
And it was adapted once into a musical called Sugar for Robert Morse. But this brand new musical version of it is written by the guys who wrote the music to Hairspray.
Yes.
And it stars Christian Borle. And that goes into previews in November before it opens, right before the holidays. And a group of us that go into New York every once in a while, we're going to sneak off and do a Wednesday matinee.
Now, I have to ask you, because, I know you're really into Broadway. What do you think about the fact that Phantom of the Opera, that's been on forever on Broadway, is closing, I think in January?
It closes. It's the longest-running Broadway musical in history.
Yes.
Although coming up the ladder is Chicago.
Yeah.
So Chicago, I think, has to run another 5 years to eclipse, or maybe 6 years to eclipse the record set by Phantom. But as they say, all good shows come to an end.
Right.
And Phantom is a huge show. It employs several hundred people on stage and backstage. And the producer, Cameron McIntosh, in interviews said, it's not losing money yet, but it costs a lot to run it. And its time is over.
Right.
So
I thought they were starting to lose money too. I'd heard a rumor that there was some.
It was one of the show. All of Broadway took a beating during the pandemic.
Right.
Everything shut down.
Right.
And when stuff came back about a year ago, stuff really started to reopen. Audiences were hesitant to going, and so some of the shows, the new shows, really drew an audience immediately. But some of the shows that have been around for a long time, that like Wicked or Hamilton or The Book of Mormon or Phantom, they depend not on New Yorkers and suburbanites anymore, but tourists. And
right.
The tourist trade hasn't totally come back to New York.
Yeah.
So
it's way down.
And Phantom was one of those shows that whether you understood English or not, the spectacle of it all you could be totally into the spectacle in the same way that when you go to an opera, it's in Italian or French or Russian. You don't necessarily understand what's going on the stage.
Yes.
But people from all over the world that want to go to see a Broadway show, Phantom is like the big thing.
Right.
And so it's...
And it does have some really good musical numbers that have really become kind of part of our musical culture now too. So I think there's that element too.
And it's still running in London, where it has eclipsed all records.
Right.
And I'm sure that there'll be a revival of it on Broadway within 10 years, because there'll be a new generation of theatergoers who haven't seen it, and it tours, but its days are over on Broadway, and it's time for... There's such a dearth of theaters available for new shows that there's so many new shows that want to happen, they can't book a theater.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really a problem.
And you think about it, Phantom of the Opera opened in 1988.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Pre the web, pre cell phones, all that. Yeah, I mean, it's when you think about it, it's amazing how long it's run, and the impact that it's had on the musical world. Yeah.
And the next longest running show that is still on the board, so to speak, is Chicago, which opened in 1996. And that was a revival of a show that the original Chicago opened the same year as A Chorus Line. And when the Tony Awards came out, and A Chorus Line won everything.
Yeah.
And Chicago was knocked off the thing, it came back to acclaim that nobody ever thought it would ever have.
Right. It was kind of a sleeper at first, wasn't it? And and eventually just kind of gained some momentum with time, which is kind of unusual, I think. I don't think that happens that often. Usually, when a Broadway musical is a real success, it's a big hit right off the bat. Yeah.
But I think the thing about Chicago was, I think that if A Chorus Line had not opened right around the time, they opened within weeks of each other.
Yes.
That Chicago would have been much bigger. Chicago had a great cast at the time, and it didn't have a disappointing run. It just wasn't a mega hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like A Chorus Line. But when it came back, the subject matter of the manipulation of the media and everybody's, quick breaking news and, crime does pay and all of that was just more relevant in today's world.
Yeah.
And Chicago's also a musical that's lasted as long as it has on Broadway because a lot of people have performed in it, whether they have any expertise or background in musical theater. I mean, Pamela Anderson was in it and ran in it for quite a while. And I'm trying to think of some of the Melanie Griffith, and some of these people that you just wouldn't expect to be doing live theater, let alone a musical, go in and out of it. And they call it stunt casting. And that's kept Chicago alive. But also, but the same thing, you don't have to understand a word of English to get what Chicago's all about.
Right. And I think also, too, don't you think both with Phantom and with Chicago, the fact that they were made into films that were fairly successful had a big impact, too? I think a lot of people out there, the tourist trade, in other words, the tourist industry, which is really important for Broadway musicals. I think, people see the movie and they say, then they know the show. And when they come to New York as a tourist, they sign up, they go, I'll go to that.
Definitely the case with Chicago because the movie version of Chicago is one of the most successful movie musicals in our time.
Right.
Subsequent to the MGM musicals and all of that. Phantom's movie version was not a big hit.
Yeah, but I thought it had enough of an impact that I think, people, I think it kind of encouraged. I'm talking about the tourist industry, which of course is, probably 60%. I don't know what the figures are, but I would guess at least 60% of the audience.
It's a known title. People know the title.
Exactly, and how that's important for tourists who are, because the tickets are, not cheap. And then you get to New York and you're trying to choose something to do, and people go with something they've heard of and they know of. And I think that has helped, if there's a film version of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I bet the videos of both of those are available to take out and borrow at the Atheneaum.
Absolutely.
Yes, so westath.org.
Yes.
Check that out.
Yes.
We're going to take another break here, and then we'll be back with more Atheneum Spotlight. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. If you missed a part of today's program or you want to share it with friends or watch it again, it's archived on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. We'll return after these announcements.
Underwriting for Community Radio on WSKB is brought to you in part by Rockies. Over 30 convenient locations throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Florida. One of the nation's largest ACE dealers. Expertise and great product selection in paint, hardware, lawn and garden. That's Rockies. Rock solid service since 1926. On the web at Rockies.com.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Hi, it's Bob Plass, and I have Wow, It's Tuesday, every Tuesday, 6 to 8. Wow, it's Tuesday.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB.
I did it!
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Atheneum Spotlight, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach here with Guy McLain, and we want to welcome to the program Nora Maroulis, who's the Senior Director of Development Communications for the Emily Dickinson Museum in Amherst. Most of you have studied her poetry in junior high, middle school, and high school English, and a lot of people don't realize that she was born and raised just up the road in Amherst. Nora comes with a great museum background, but not only in museum work, and she's been associated with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Eric Carle Museum, the Smithsonian, the De Cordova Sculpture Park, the Worcester Art Museum, but also involved with Wunder Arts, which was a program started in Amherst with a gallery, which continues today, not as a gallery, but as an incubator and a consulting group for young and emerging artists. And Nora, it is always great to see you.
Oh my gosh, gentlemen, Mark, it's so good to see you. Guy, it's so nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
I'm so excited to be here.
We're glad to have you. So, first of all, for a lot of us that have never been to the Emily Dickinson Museum, so much is going on there and so much expansion and new programs. Give us an overview of what you're doing.
Well, we're looking out at our 20th anniversary in 2023. The museum, obviously the Homestead and the Evergreens have been in their locations for many, many years since the 19th century, but it wasn't until 2003 that the Evergreens, Austin and Susan Dickinson's home, Emily's brother, and the homestead itself, which was the Dickinson home for many years, came together under the ownership of Amherst College and became an incorporated museum. And so we're looking at our 20th anniversary, but we've also just completed a long-range plan that calls for growth of programs, expansion and enhancement of the campus in different ways. We've just completed the second of 3 restoration projects at the homestead. And so what people could expect in coming to the museum now, since we've reopened after 2 years of closure, is newly restored spaces and the sort of enduring story of Emily and her work and how important her home was to her.
What made you choose? I mean, you've worked in museums all over the country. What made you choose to come to the Emily Dickinson Museum?
Well, like a lot of people, COVID sort of turned me around in many ways. And I had been consulting for about 5 years, since 2017. And the Emily Dickinson Museum was one of my clients. I've also been sort of hanging around there for a long time because I've been a longtime friend of Executive Director Jane Wald, and worked with the museum when I was at the Eric Carle Museum, sort of building the museum's 10 consortium. And so I've known about it, it's sort of like right in my backyard. I live in Pelham, so just east of Amherst proper. And, when COVID came, the consulting was still going strong, but I just felt this need to be closer to home. And this position came up, and I went for it and was fortunate enough to get it. And now my commute is 4 minutes down the hill.
Yeah, that's a great commute. What got you into museums to start with?
Well, I studied art history, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, and knew pretty early on that I didn't necessarily want to follow an academic track, and also wasn't that super excited about the curatorial track either. My passion really was with engaging audiences and people and working with donors. And so after I finished my graduate study at Columbia, I was connected to an opportunity at the Metropolitan Museum. I also was given an opportunity or offered an opportunity at the Frick to work in their art reference library. And there came the decision. Am I a front of house person who likes to work with the public and work with donors, or am I a back of house person? And I chose the Met, and I chose to work on their big Fun for the Met campaign back in the early 90s. Yep. And never looked back. And, the interesting thing about the Emily Dickinson Museum is that with all this growth and enhancement, we have a lot of money to raise. We have to pay for these ambitious plans. And so that's exciting to me. It is the first time, one of the first and only times that I've been not working in support of an art museum. And people have asked me about that a lot as well, but it really is, it's about her. It's about her enduring legacy, and it's about, particularly right now, and coming out of COVID, and with the Dickinson series that enjoyed 3 seasons on Apple TV and essentially handed Emily to a whole new generation of people around the world. She's having a moment. And so it's a really exciting time to be working in support of her and really helping to position the museum for greater awareness and support.
So she's worldwide known for her poems. A lot of people don't really know about her backstory, if you want to say, although they're learning more about it. I knew nothing about her until I saw Julie Harris in the play The Belle of Amherst, which I don't remember where I saw it. But when I started working at WFCR, which was around the corner in Amherst from the Emily Dickinson house, I don't think that I ever went there until much later on after I'd been around. Where are the visitors coming from? Are they coming from the neighborhood, or are they coming from all over?
We have a lot of it's sort of, the question mark is sort of pre-COVID, post-COVID, right?
Right.
Pre-Dickinson series, post-Dickinson series. Because it's not just about COVID itself, it's about how she and her work spoke to people around the world during COVID. We jokingly refer to her as the queen of quarantine or the queen of social distancing. So that's really Emily's backstory in a way, is that what little we know of her, and what little has been interpreted of her as a person, not her work or her letters, but her as a person, was this sort of quiet, reclusive figure who shied away from the world. So this notion that people pass by the Emily Dickinson Museum never having gone, even though they've lived nearby for however many years, or that it's just this quiet, sort of tucked away place that people aren't aware of. That's all changing now. And I will tell you the difference in audience between before we closed due to COVID and since we've reopened, and even during the pandemic. I mean, I can't take credit for it because it started before my arrival, but the program team, Jane Wald and Brooke Steinhauser, who's the program director, did not miss a beat. They pivoted immediately to providing virtual programs. And in so doing, the poetry festival that they launched in September of 2020 attracted 5,000 people from all over the world. We had people from, I don't even know, like 65 countries and 49 states that first year. I think we were missing Wyoming. I don't know why, but anyways, so the demographic of our audience, we all always knew that there were raving fans out there. We just couldn't figure out how to get to them. And the confluence of COVID and technology helped them raise their hands and helped us see them and engage with them. And, I would say, if you looked at our visitation, our demographics pre-COVID, it was as most museums are, most art museums, at least, that I've been involved with, it's white women aged 55 to 75, and now it's just exploded. I mean, we've got all ages and such a rich and diverse group of people, not only that are seeking us out for resources and programs, but also those people who are, in our midst, in our special guests and VIPs, contemporary voices in poetry, wonderfully diverse from all parts of the country and all over the world. So it's really opening her up to a whole new audience.
Yeah, years ago, I met a man who was visiting the area from Denmark, and he was here because he was an Emily Dickinson scholar from Denmark. And I was going like, are there people in Denmark who read Emily Dickinson? I was kind of taken aback by that. And yes, he said there was a very large audience in Denmark. So I think it's very interesting how Emily Dickinson has truly become an internationally known figure and is someone celebrated around the world. There. So I find that interesting. It sounds like to me that's only growing with time and with events that have been happening lately. Do you feel the same way that she's becoming more internationally known?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are certain areas, it's kind of like thinking back to the Carl Museum and how popular Eric Carle and his work were in certain pockets around the world. He's, world known, but there were specific audiences in Japan and in Germany. Japan, I could say, it's because they have long celebrated the art of the picture book. They've elevated it. And so they saw in Eric Carle and his work, something wonderful that they could relate to. For Emily, I mean, she's just a star all over the world. It's just amazing to have, to be online for our poetry festival, which is actually taking place this week through Sunday. And we're doing it hybrid this year. So we're going back to on-site events, but also we need to sort of feed that international audience with virtual events. So we're doing some hybrid and some all virtual. And when the people check in from, when we're on the group chat, what have you, we're in this virtual program, people are checking in from Turkey, from Hong Kong, from Brazil, from Spain, literally every corner of the globe. And the other wonderful thing about it is that when I say raving fans, these are raving fans, because if you can imagine somebody clocking in from Hong Kong it's the middle of the night there. And they're sort of standing on their head to be a part of this celebration and just get closer to Emily. So yeah, definitely, Guy. She really is an international star, and so now it's a matter for me and my staff to make sure that we maximize that positioning and that momentum, and that we're able to serve our mission. Which is to amplify her revolutionary poetic voice from the place she called home. So the place is still very important, although now we have to realize that there are thousands, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who will be her fans and will be supporters of the museum who will never darken the door of the museum. So we've got to think about that in terms of our programs.
But I do think that one thing that's very interesting about Emily Dickinson that may not apply to other poets and other figures is because of the fact that she stayed in her house most of the time. She was a recluse. The location, the Emily Dickinson house, is especially important. It gives a sense of what her environment was. And so I think that's kind of something that's very unique about the Emily Dickinson house that may not apply in other places where someone, was there for a short, you see these writers' homes where they spend a year or two there and they move somewhere else. But this was her lifelong home, and I think that's very important. And I think also, too, it seemed like to me that you can get a sense of Emily Dickinson, even though, of course, Amherst has changed, over the time. You can get a sense of what Emily Dickinson's life was like from visiting Amherst as well as the house. Don't you agree with that?
Absolutely agree, Guy, and you nailed it in terms of how important place is for Emily Dickinson, because that home, that place, was so integrally woven into her work. It was part of her. I mean, it was sort of like part of her body, part of her brain, and what inspired her, what she could see from her window, and the town of Amherst itself. There are a couple of things since I've been at the Dickinson Museum the last 2 years that have really kind of changed my perspective and just enriched it, I guess, in terms of knowledge of her. And it's been so wonderful to learn about, through different sources, what Amherst may have been like back then. So there's two things. I mentioned again the Dickinson series on Apple TV, which is just, we always knew she was a rock star, but Elena Smith and the folks at Apple TV really did a great job. It is an interpretation. It is, I think there are purists who will say that that's not my Emily, and but everybody has to understand is that that's what creativity and our artistry is. It's interpreting something that you are passionate about. That's engaging, and that series really did a wonderful job of that. Funny and just smart, and gives you a sense of, gives me a sense, but also importantly gives younger people a sense of what it may have been like, with some serious artistic license to be living, as a creative and as a woman in the 19th century. And then the other source that I really love is Martha Ackman's book, These Fevered Days. Martha is a Dickinson scholar. She taught for many years at Mount Holyoke, and she's written extensively about Emily Dickinson. And this book that I think was published in 2018 or 2019 is terrific. It's very engaging, it's very accessible, and it basically captures 10 moments in the life of Emily Dickinson. It sort of expounds upon them from the age of, from adolescence to, the end of her life. And it is, again, like the Dickinson series, it's funny, it's smart, it's accessible, and it really sort of has for me at least, changed my perspective on Emily a little bit. Although I always, as I said, I always thought she was rather punk rock, and that she probably, if she could, have worn combat boots underneath her white dress, as opposed to this notion of her as, this frail, shy, ghost of a woman who hid away. I think she was much bolder than that.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the connection. Here's a scholar from Mount Holyoke College today writing about Emily Dickinson. She went to school there when it was Mount Holyoke Female Seminary is what it was called then, right? In the early years,
Yes,
founded by Mary Lyons, another of kind of a very intrepid, woman who was kind of looking ahead for women's education. And so I think, yeah, that's another interesting connection. And then also, too, Amherst College is quite involved in supporting this. Isn't that correct?
They are. I mean, technically, we are owned. The museum is owned by Amherst College, and we have a memorandum of understanding that lays out exactly what our structure is. We are independent. We have our own board of governors, and conveniently, we are responsible for all of our own fundraising, annual operating capital, everything. So it's a wonderful partnership because we can serve the audience of Amherst College, the students, the faculty, the staff. And also, there are lots of pros with regard to being tied to Amherst College, access to a network, and also just, celebrating the connection that the Dickinson family has long had with Amherst College. Emily's father and brother were very involved in the founding and early days of Amherst College and getting it going. And so there's a deep and long connection there that is terrific. And yeah, I mean, we just welcomed the trustees of the Amherst College board to come a couple of weeks ago on a beautiful Friday night. They came and visited and saw the restored spaces, and it was really wonderful because now we've got even more advocates, out in the world sort of singing the museum's praises. So it was really great.
And isn't a major portion of the Emily Dickinson papers housed in the Amherst College Library in the archives and special collections?
There are, yes, in special collections. Absolutely, Guy. So that's the interesting thing to note about the museum. We do have a collection of objects and items that number, we thought it was about 8,000. It's growing. And we're actually engaged in an IMLS, Institute for Museum and Library Studies, collections cataloging project right now, which is how we're discovering that it's probably more like 12 or 13,000 objects. But key things like the original manuscripts are not in our collection. They were dispersed through, sort of handing down and passing on, and divided between Harvard and Amherst College Special Collections. So, the fact that we have all of these wonderful items and in our collection, and also have access to both Harvard's and the primary sources at both Harvard and at Amherst College is wonderful. They're both great partners.
I have a question. How can people that are listening today have never been, how can they learn about the programs and the services that you offer through website and social media?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to visit our website, which is a wealth of information about not only what resources we have, but also what programs are coming up, what's happening now. And that is emilydickinsonmuseum.org. Again, that's emilydickinsonmuseum.org. And that's the best way. That's also a way to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, where we have a loyal and growing audience ever since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's where we're engaging with some of our younger audience members. But definitely the website is probably the best way to find out what's coming up.
And the Emily Dickinson Museum is one of several in Western Massachusetts, particularly in the Valley, that really offer unique experiences to people. Yeah. And there was a Museum's 10. Does that still exist?
It still exists. And as I mentioned, it was started shortly after the Carl Museum opened.
Right, because you and I at one point had sat down with Chrissy No at the Eric Carl Museum, and I was doing, I don't remember what element of work, but Museums 10 and the cultural tourism element, we were trying to build a bigger arts audience up and down the Valley, and Museums 10 was really a major part of that, to get people to go not to just one museum, but to a whole batch of them.
Yeah. It was and is still a great consortium. And it actually, we rebranded as Museums 10. The museums of the 5 college area, as they were known, had been in existence for, probably a decade before I showed up in 2002 at the Carl. But with the opening of the Carl and all the attention that was being paid to the Carl at the time, there was a real opportunity that we could see to gather together with our peers and, have the power in numbers, right? So Museums 10 was sort of born out of that the identification of that opportunity. And it was really a way to remind people that, there are these 10 museums in the Upper Valley. And in the early days, we did these sort of thematic exhibitions. One of them was Go Dutch, and that's probably around the time that you and Christy and I sat down. And we got some state funding to rebrand and to launch these joint exhibitions. And it just grew from there. And the partnership is still strong today. The directors still meet, the marketing folks still meet, the program folks still meet. They're working on timely issues, pooling resources around DEIA policies and other things that we can all benefit from, sort of pooling information about.
My next question is, the Western Massachusetts, and we talk about this on almost all of the program we do on this program and others. Western Massachusetts is known for what they call the creative economy, and it's become an arts hub for visual artists, designers, actors, musicians, and what have you, and draws tourists to our area because they want to take example, and learn from our cultural resources. How many visitors, pre-pandemic, how many visitors would set foot at the Emily Dickinson Museum, and what kind of impact did that have on the town of Amherst?
Well, I think, again, we go back to our historic home status and limitations of space in that regard. I think at the time that the Carl launched, we expected that we would settle in somewhere about 50,000 visitors a year. That first year it was 90,000 visitors because there was such a hunger for that place. For the Emily Dickinson Museum, because it's a historic home and because it was for many years this sort of quiet place, and it's guided tour only, still, it's a little bit different now. We have time tickets and you purchase them online and in advance, but it's still, there's a capacity issue there with a historic home, which, Guy, you will understand well. So I think pre-pandemic, I want to say that we were about 10,000 visitors a year. And now I think we're slated for 15,000 visitors a year, just because of how we've created efficiencies and tweaked the tours and so forth. That said, we have, as I mentioned before, we're attracting so much other attention and other visitation online, et cetera. But it definitely, the museum definitely has an impact on particularly Amherst, but the Upper Valley and the Valley as a whole, because it feeds into this notion, Mark, that you were talking about, that this is a creative valley, that people seek out the Valley for entertainment and recreation and creative inspiration. And and to the point, sometimes, in many ways, I was just talking about this last night, that people come here to visit, to tour these wonderful places, and they end up staying or moving here from other parts of the country because it's just such a great dynamic place. And there's so much going on here. And the quality of life is great. So yeah, we definitely, as a group and singly, the museum itself, terrific impact on Amherst. And if the folks at the Business Improvement District and Chamber offices in downtown Amherst are correct, the number one question that they get over the phone and when people walk into the visitor center is, well, it was, when is the Emily Dickinson Museum going to reopen? Where's the Emily Dickinson Museum? I want to visit the Emily Dickinson Museum. So that's a good thing. It'd be interesting to see like how much of the tourism that's generated to and through Amherst is the result of people being interested in Emily.
Nora, thanks for being with us this morning. We've run out of time. We'll have to have you come on the program again.
Absolutely. This was a joy.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much.
We've been chatting with Nora Maroulis from the Emily Dickinson Museum, and that wraps up another Atheneaum Spotlight. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. If you've missed a part of today's program, you can catch it again on YouTube under WSKB Community Radio. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
New York, 1929. Prohibition, bootleggers, flappers, bathtub gin. Life is roaring, the music is hot, and the whole street is moving to the beat of the Charleston. It seems like everyone, everywhere is looking for a good time and a drink. Or the best place to find one is on the other side of a door. The password is $1 Billion Baby.
Gotcha.